Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how we might have Nintendo's entire 2026 lineup leaked. Now, I feel like there's no way this is actually the case. I feel like odds are there's gotta be some things here that we just don't know about. But there have been the reports from both Nate the Hate and Video Games Chronicle, both of which are very reputable, about both the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake and Star Fox, and I've been theorizing about both games for a very long time because the evidence has been mounting, especially for Ocarina of Time, and I'm very happy to hear, at least according to these reports, that both are coming out this year. Fingers crossed that turns out to be true. But from these stories, and there were other details about other games coming out in this year of 2026 from Nintendo, but from these stories, from everything that was heard, a lot of people started running with the narrative that Nintendo's entire 2026 lineup was leaked, and I've disagreed with this point to say that because if you watch Nate the Hate's podcast, when he talks about this, he says there's going to be more. He's talking mostly about summer releases and some late year stuff, which we'll touch a little bit more on a little bit later into this video, but that does not suggest the entire lineup. Now, maybe a big part of it, especially considering we already have been through a big chunk of the year already, so obviously the first few months we know about that, and so if we get the summer and some late year releases, that covers a lot. But there have been some other little things that have come up, and if we account for those other little things in conjunction with these latest reports, then we might be able to fill in all the gaps here and have pretty much a very close to complete picture of how Nintendo's 2026 is going to go, which is what I want to go through today. Now, before diving into things here, let me remind you all, I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers. It's been a long time, but I'm hoping to get there soon. So if you do find yourself enjoying my videos and you haven't subscribed already, I would very much appreciate your subscription. And for those who have been watching all this time, liking, commenting, that all is super helpful. But let's touch on something before diving into this lineup, because I think it needs to be spoken of, and I'm sure there are going to be some questions out there. There has been this viral story that's gone out over the last couple days throughout the course of the weekend, and it's about Nintendo putting out leakbait. Basically, Nintendo is putting out fake leaks to trick leakers to find them. And a lot of people are now taking this story and taking that to mean that all the things we've been hearing about from the reputable sources and such, with all the evidence and all, is all completely wrong. And there is no actual legitimate reason to believe that with confidence. Let me be clear here. This story is basically a nothing burger. It's not entirely a nothing burger, but it's basically a nothing burger. And the reason why it's basically a nothing burger is because the idea of leakbait, Nintendo or other companies putting out fake leaks out there to find the actual leak, to plug that up and fire whoever it is that's putting out that information that shouldn't be, that's been done for years. That's a normal thing. That's part of the industry. That's part of why whenever we're talking about these things, I'm like, hey, take it with a grain of salt. Be cautious. Even if they are credible, even if they have a long track history of correctness, that does not guarantee it's going to be true. Development is fluid. Plans can change. Or sometimes there's leak bait. Sometimes these things happen. So this story going around right now is legitimately nothing new at all whatsoever. This is a variable, a factor that myself and others who are aware of this stuff have kept in consideration this entire time. And so when we're talking about the reputable people, like Nate the Hate, you think they're not aware of that? They absolutely are aware of that. Now, does that mean that these reports are going to be 100% true? No, it doesn't. You should still take it with a grain of salt, as you would have before this story. Literally, it changes nothing. If anything, if there's anything to this story, it's just that Nintendo has responded to the recent accurate leaks and is now making a bigger push to plug up the leaks so it doesn't happen again. But this is something that is happening all the time. It really is nothing new. It doesn't really mean that much. In fact, Nintendo Prime, who was the one who reported on this, who said on Twitter with various sources that this is happening, he'll tell you the exact same thing, that this is nothing new. He was just sharing something he heard about on Twitter. It wasn't meant to be made into a big story, and he even said in his tweet that Nate the Hate is not someone who has been prone to getting caught by the leak bait, because he's very cautious, he takes his time, he's been at this for a long time. So all this means is what it meant before the story came out. Take things with a grain of salt. That said, considering the track history of Nate the Hate and Video Games Chronicle, these reports are meaningful. So no promises in terms of what exactly is going to happen, but I am under the impression that what has been reported is probably what's happening. We'll see, fingers crossed. And actually, something to further support the report by Nate the Hate is some recent ratings, official ratings here. So Nate the Hate had talked about Nintendo's summer lineup and said that both Splatoon Raiders and Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave would be coming out in the summer. And if that's to be the case, then these games should be rated soon. Well, guess what? They've been rated. Here we go, Splatoon Raiders has a PEGI rating now. Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave has also been rated as well. Both have PEGI ratings now. This strongly suggests that information on these games will be coming soon. They are very close to completion, and the idea of them coming out this summer is extremely plausible. So the timing's actually uncanny, and it is very suggestive that Nate the Hate's report about Nintendo's summer lineup has a very good chance to be true. So let's keep that in mind and now talk about what Nintendo's 2026 lineup is going to be. So we already know about the first 4 months most likely, and maybe even the first 5. So we got the Animal Crossing Switch 2 edition and the free update version 3.0 in January. That was kind of a break month after the big holiday from Nintendo. And then in February, got Mario Tennis Fever, and also a surprise announcement, a very simple Switch 2 edition, but still a Switch 2 edition, an enhanced version of Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. So that was the content for February. In March, we got Pokemon Pokopia and the Super Mario Bros. Wonder Switch 2 edition plus Bella Bell Park. In April, we're getting Tomodachi Life, we just got Pokemon Champions, and so it's kind of seemed like the last 3 months they've had like a major game and a smaller little thing to come out in that month. And in May, we know about Yoshi and Mysterious Book. It's been dated for May, and that's it so far. That's why I suggested that maybe we don't know the entire lineup leading up to May, because there might be something else Nintendo announces to come out in May as a quick surprise. Maybe another little Switch 2 edition, kind of like Xenoblade Chronicles X, maybe a big DLC update. These are possibilities, but it could also be maybe a break month before Nintendo really starts to drive home even bigger releases. Which brings us to the first supposedly leaked title for the year here, and that is Star Fox for Nintendo Switch 2. It's being said that this game will be revealed in this month of April. Fingers crossed, I'm waiting on it. But the crazier part is not just this supposed imminent reveal, but that it's coming out with an extremely quick turnaround for this June, which I think would be an amazing way to start off the summer, a late June release for a new Star Fox on Switch 2. That could be amazing. But we actually do know about something else official that was just announced recently, and that's Rhythm Heaven. It's coming out on the 2nd of July. So June still has that big vacancy, but Nintendo's already putting out release dates for a little bit beyond. I find that curious, perhaps somewhat supportive of the idea that Star Fox is going to be announced soon. But with these ratings in mind, and what we've heard from the reports of both Splatoon Raiders and Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave coming out this summer, I'm going to venture to guess that the big July game is Splatoon Raiders. So you still have Rhythm Heaven in July, but that won't be the only thing. Rhythm Heaven is a smaller budget title release. I think it makes sense to also expect a big major title, as Nintendo's been kind of handling things throughout this year and last year as well, by the way. And then I think to follow Splatoon Raiders in August, we could be getting Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave as the big release for that month. But summer actually ends in September, and there were other titles that Nate the Hate brought up as titles that could be coming out in the summer, such as some sort of new version of Switch Sports, be it a Switch 2 edition, maybe a sequel, we're not entirely sure. But maybe actually we should be a little bit more sure. Because when we go back to the Midori codename leaks, I've talked about these a lot on the channel, many of which have been confirmed already, like for Super Mario Party Jamboree, Echoes of Wisdom, and Donkey Kong Bonanza and all that stuff. There are a couple others that have yet to have been confirmed, but we think we kind of know what they are. One of them is a project codenamed Anna. Now, what's interesting about Anna is that Anna relates to Elsa, as in Anna and Elsa from Frozen, so there is a relation there. And Switch Sports was codenamed Elsa. So the suggestion is that this other project here is related. This is how a lot of code names work. They'll pick some sort of code name that kind of falls within a certain framework or pattern when you're having a follow-up. Like a lot of Zelda games use playing card code names, for example. And these codename products wouldn't be just like simple Switch 2 editions. These would be brand new titles. And so I'm thinking this Switch Sports thing is not a Switch Sports Switch 2 edition, but rather a brand new Switch Sports, perhaps a Switch Sports 2 or a Nintendo Switch Sports Resort. And I actually think that could be a great way to cap off the summer. So maybe that comes out this September before summer totally closes out here. A nice little bit of separation between some big core-centric titles like Splatoon, Raiders, and Fire Emblem, putting out this cool casual title before you close out with some other strong core titles for the year. But before getting to the final 3 months of the year, there are some other Switch 2 editions that have been mentioned, or some kind of enhancement, like an enhancement of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and also for Pikmin 4. Now, July already has Rhythm Heaven, and we're supposing it also is going to have Splatoon Raiders, but August and September right now, I haven't suggested something for one of those months. So I could see a Pikmin 4 Switch 2 edition or a Xenoblade Chronicles Switch 2 edition being slotted into each of those months here. Something like that, I imagine, for many months is going to be like that secondary, smaller little title. I'm calling these smaller titles because they would just be Switch 2 editions, not full-on new games. And another one I'll throw out as a possibility, and this has not come from the Nate the Hate reports or VGC, but this is a rumor that's been going around about a Super Metroid remake. Now, initially, there was this rumor of a Super Metroid remake from Nash Weedle. And right now, a lot of people don't want to trust Nash Weedle as much because he did put out, they had heard there would be a bigger direct in February, March with a 3D Mario reveal and the next Monolith Soft title reveal, and none of that happened. So a lot of people are not really trusting of Nash Weedle right now. However, Nash Weedle does still have a pretty significant track history of getting a lot of things correct, a lot of things that are not just shots in the dark, a lot of things that he would really kind of actually have to know about it to say it before it would be revealed. One of the more recent things, which is still not confirmed but corroborated by others, is technically Nash Weedle put out the info first that there's going to be a big surprise reveal in April to come out in June, and we've been told that is Star Fox. And of course we have the Nate the Hate and VGC reports that corroborate this information. So if that turns out to be true, technically Nash Weedle hinted at it first, which to me is just suggestive that yes, he still does get some information. Doesn't mean he's going to get everything right though, so you gotta take it with a grain of salt. And there are leakers that are more consistent than others, and there are some that just share out a lot more information. Like Nash Weedle shares out a lot of stuff. Not just first-party things, but third-party things too that are being confirmed left and right. So, as before, I still think it's worthy of conversation here. But anyways, to the Super Metroid remake thing, he's talked about that. But my kind of understanding is that when it comes to timing, while I think Nash Weedle gets a lot of things correct, the timing I'm a little bit more suspicious of, so I'm not so sure if this Super Metroid remake would be coming out this year. However, there is an additional rumor about a Super Metroid remake that seems to have gained some traction because a lot of things that were said in that rumor were before the reports by Nate the Hate and VGC, and part of that rumor includes a Super Metroid remake but a pixelized version. And so if this part is true, and I'm very, very skeptical of it, but I'm mentioning as a possibility, if this part is true, and it's like a simpler 2D sprite-based Super Metroid remake as a little bit of a tide over until they put out the next new 2D Metroid maybe a year or two from now, then I could see something like that being fitted in as a secondary title in one of these months. Like maybe in October alongside another big release from Nintendo, their biggest release of October. So what might that be? Well, we've heard from Special Nick about the amiibo for a Luigi's Mansion thing. We know Next Level Games is well past their due date for their next big game, at least according to the pattern they've been following over the last few generations. And if we're not getting 3D Mario year according to the reports, then I do think Nintendo needs some kind of other big Mario universe title in the closing months of the year Luigi's Mansion 4 feels really likely and could just be right around the corner. To me, this seems like a very logical inclusion for this year's lineup considering what we've heard, and like Luigi's Mansion 3, put it out in October. It makes perfect sense. I think this could actually be it. Yeah, there are rumors from it coming from some credible places. Not necessarily that it's coming out this year, but it could come out this year, and I think it would be very fitting. But that brings us to the 2 last months of the year. And we've also had the reports for the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake, a full remake with supposedly a big budget according to what Special Nick has heard, and that there would even be a big Zelda Switch 2 edition. Given there's no Pokemon coming out this year, and considering how in the past we have seen several November months have a big Zelda release, I think it makes a lot of sense for Nintendo to put this out in November as their big sort of holiday title. If there's a game that Nintendo feels comfortable putting out in the same release month as Grand Theft Auto, I think it would be the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake, a big boy ambitious remake. So, of course, assuming the reports are true, this is when I think it would probably be coming out. Some of you might be wondering, well, what about the long-rumored Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD? Well, they've been long-rumored for a very, very long time, so year by year I've grown more and more skeptical. However, I will say this, it would make sense if they didn't come out because Nintendo was saving them for the 40th anniversary. And I also do think it makes sense to have some sort of release for the 40th anniversary that is for Switch 1 users, because I'm pretty sure this remake is not going to be a Switch 1 title. So maybe something like a port of some Wii U titles could help Switch 1 fans during this 40th anniversary celebration, which you would think would happen at some point this year, but maybe they save them closer to the movie release sometime next year. Going back to what we've heard from Nate the Hate though, the Dust Bloods is supposed to come out later into the year. And considering that maybe a lot of other companies will want to avoid that window when GTA is coming out, I could see the Dust Bloods coming out in December, a spot where we've seen some other big core-centric Nintendo games come out, like last year with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, or back in 2018 with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, or 2017 with Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Something like the Dust Bloods, which Nintendo is publishing. This is in collaboration with From Software, a huge exclusive here. So I think this would be a great way to wrap up the year. And looking at this overall lineup here, I have this graphic I put together. Keep in mind, there still are all the smaller things like the Pikmin 4 Switch 2 edition, maybe a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 enhancement, things like that. Rhythm Heaven is also already officially slated for July. When we account for all that, looking at this, I feel like this is actually a really good year. And there's been a lot of people suggesting that this would be a light year from Nintendo. This to me does not seem light. Now, what I will say is that the first half hasn't really been for me. I haven't bothered to play the Animal Crossing update. I did not pick up Mario Tennis Fever. I did pick up Pokopia, but haven't put too many hours into it. It hasn't really kept me engaged. Tomodachi Life, personally I have zero interest in, but I know a lot of people are hyped for this, so I'm so excited for you. And Yoshi Mysterious Book, after the latest trailer, just doesn't seem like something I'm going to really want to pick up. So, the first half of the year has seemed pretty light to me personally, but provided everything turns out to be true here, Star Fox in June, things are going to really pick up for me, and I'm sure a lot of other core-centric Nintendo fans. So Tomb Raiders, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, I'm definitely picking those up. I would absolutely be 100% on board day one for a Switch Sports Resort. I'm actually a big Switch Sports fan, which, you know, is one of the few casual Nintendo series I'm extremely into. But a Luigi's Mansion 4 in October, an Ocarina of Time remake in November, the Dust Bloods to close things out in December with some other smaller things in between, that to me would be a stellar lineup, if true. But will it be true? It's hard to imagine this is going to hold up exactly as I'm saying here, but maybe it's close. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.